I knew it was special. But as soon as I set up the Whiskey Baron, I just knew that I had to bottle this cask. So I suppose Charlie and I really met when we were kids. We were two like naughty little boys, really. Went to neighbouring schools, and at parties we'd always end up in similar sort of small circles, largely because Charlie and I were really the only two people there drinking whiskey. Nothing special, Macallan Golds and different bits and pieces, but we were interested. We had certainly a passion. We enjoyed having a bit more of a conversation. It wasn't just down it, and on to the next sort of thing. We actually wanted to chat, wanted to learn a little bit. And granted, we came at it from a completely sort of novice point of view. Charlie, I knew, had his casks of Springbank. I knew that his dad had bought him a few casks, and I suppose at that point I started understanding a little bit more as to actually what it was that he owned. I'd heard him say, "Oh, I've got a cask of Springbank," and whatever before, but as we got to know each other more and more at these parties, drinking little drams of our whiskey, he started talking to me about these casks. He actually had 6 of them. And it was more that he would actually bring samples of the whiskies to the party. So, I mean, yeah, I'd been sampling these whiskies really from the age of sort of, 16, 17-ish, I suppose. Cask strength Springbank whiskey. It doesn't really get much better than that as a 17-year-old. But I'd sort of seen it growing over the few years, and every time we tried it, it was that much better. And we were so sort of hyped up about the potential to bottle it, to do something with it. And then I, weirdly enough, ended up in the industry. And all of a sudden it became actually possible, maybe to get Charlie involved. So I did. I went back to him and I started talking to him more, and again, learning that much more that time round because I had a bit more knowledge, and so understanding how he got them even. His dad ended up meeting the master distiller, or the soon-to-be master distiller. He wasn't even the master distiller at Springbank. He was actually the master distiller of, I think it was of Bushmills at the time. And he met him in a pub in Ireland, and this guy was chatting away. And Charlie's dad is, he loves his whiskey. He's like Charlie and me, really, really interested. And they got talking. And this guy basically said, "Look, moving over to Scotland." And he basically said, "We'll be selling casks." And yeah, I mean, essentially Charlie's dad bought in. I think he bought 396s, 397s. He can't have paid more than $2,000 a pop. And ultimately, he gave them to Charlie, and Charlie sort of learned about alcohol through them and would visit the distillery, once every year or two as a kid. So at this point, I was selling casks. I knew Charlie had these Springbank casks, and I knew that they were worth some money, a good bit of money. I mentioned them to one of my directors at the time, who, his eyes just lit up, and I can understand that now, and in hindsight, God, I'm glad we didn't go down that route. So I approached Charlie. I said, "Look, I'm obviously doing this now. I can help you. I can make you a lot of money. I think this is the sort of money we could be looking at." And his ears certainly perked up, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't quite there. He was hesitant, he was unsure, and I think ultimately he kind of wanted to hold on to the casks for a little bit himself. I think he sort of wanted a bit of involvement to see them mature a little bit, and ultimately he just didn't really want to work with me. The offer was good, but it wasn't good enough. So I set up the Whiskey Baron in 2018, and Charlie was definitely one of the first people that I wanted to talk to, because I had clients that moved over with me from my last company, wanted to sort of use their stock and basically be a part of what I was doing. But I still had Charlie Springbank in the back of my mind from when we were kids. He had obviously said no the first time round, my previous company, but set up a new thing, and I thought it's definitely worth approaching him again. Just putting the idea past him. Just float it. I'm not ready to bottle it yet, but I want it. And I know I want it. And we met up, and I think it became pretty clear to him very early on. He knew I wanted it as well. We met up, we had a few whiskies, and he brought a sample. Now, obviously, I've tried this Springbank a few times as a kid, as a non-whiskey drinker or somebody who's sort of not in the industry. I've now got a few years experience under my belt, and so I'm coming to this whiskey with a whole new mindset, a whole lot more experience, but also a completely different and more refined palate. And I remember sitting down and actually just smelling it. And wow, I mean, just being blown away. This is a whiskey just apart from the others. This is something truly special. This is an oddity, you know, and I to this day, I believe that, you know. We only bottle really, really top quality stuff with the Whiskey Baron. And I sort of, you know, I said this to Charlie, it was very apparent. I need this to be part of what we're doing. Stick with me here. Let's keep in contact. And it was about 2 years after that. And so we meet up and we tried it. And it was weird. It was one of those moments you can't really put your finger on what happened, but we both just looked at each other and this is it. This needs to be bottled now. You know, I suppose there's an argument to say, well, who are we to know? You leave it another 5 years, maybe it would get better. But there's something very, very different. You know, having tried it from sort of 15, 16, 17, 18 years old to then trying it at 21, 22, 23 years old. So it was 22 at the beginning of this year. So trying it at that 22 years old, something had changed. And I said to Charlie, we need to do this soon, actually. The last thing I want is for this cask to overcook. We had the labels drawn up. He loved the labels. We went through it all. It was very clear, obviously, it had to be bottled at cask strength. Again, you have a Springbank that's maturing in such a fine sherry butt for 23 years. To add water to it would be sacrilege. Do it at home if you want, but not in the bottle. And yeah, essentially, we shook hands. And I was so glad because I have essentially I was working it out, the best part of 6 years chasing this cask. And I've known about it for 10, 11, 12 years maybe. All that time, even before I was in the industry, I knew it was special. But as soon as I set up the Whiskey Baron, I just knew that I had to bottle this cask. And I knew that if I didn't bottle this now, I may never have the opportunity to bottle something so special again, particularly from Springbank Distillery, because they don't sell casks anymore. So the Renaissance line is really... It's to tell the stories of the original Whiskey Barons. Renaissance obviously means rebirth in French. And this Renaissance expression, our Springbank, tells the story of Captain Bill McCoy. For those of you who don't know, Bill McCoy was the founder of Rum Row. And essentially during Prohibition, you could sail out about a mile or so off the coast of New York to a stretch of ships that were pulled up, and you could essentially get on board, buy your alcohol wholesale, and then bootleg it back to shore. So, although he's not a baron, we did want to pay respect to Bill McCoy for all of the work and, well, basically for driving the whiskey industry forward in times of Prohibition. As you can see here, Bill McCoy is on the dock at Campbelltown. He's loading up his ship. The reason we decided to use the Springbank for this expression is Bill McCoy would have been very well renowned for supplying Irish whiskies, for supplying Islay whiskies, but also for supplying Campbelltown whiskies. He wouldn't have really ventured that far ashore into the Scottish mainland, purely because at the time, Irish whiskey was actually considered to be the premium. However, he would have definitely stopped off in Campbelltown because it would have been along his way. And because Springbank was around at the time, we think that there is every possibility that he would have stocked up on Springbank, particularly on whiskies this good. For those of you who don't know and haven't put it together, the real McCoy, that phrase, comes from Captain Bill McCoy. And it is because he became so well known for providing a quality spirit that was uncut and unadulterated, which in times of Prohibition was not the easiest thing to come by. And so when we sat down, myself and Charlie, at the beginning of 2020, and I told him this story, and I said, look, the way I see it is, this is the real McCoy. He sort of went, yeah, okay, mate, I totally see it. You've got it. Sold me. The cask is yours. Let's work on it. And I think that's exactly what this does. It tells the story of the real McCoy, but it also gives you a taste of the real McCoy. And I just can't wait for you all to experience this Springbank of ours, but also all of our expressions moving forward. Yes, this Springbank is a huge step up for the Whiskey Baron, but please make no mistake, this is just the beginning. We have so many other casks that we are patiently waiting to bottle, watching with eager eyes as they mature. And I think that what this will really do more than anything is bring us into the mainstream, let people know they can trust us, And as we develop, I think that trust will grow and our community will grow. And I can't wait for that because I love everybody that's part of our community thus far.